I would say that I'm an expert in the sort of the interior of the hospital. I'm not that bothered with the exterior of it. The building, sort of the envelope, is usually left to someone else, but I deal mainly with the planning of the interior parts. And my role is usually that of a lead architect or a team leader, or sometimes in a more of an expert capability. But hospital projects are very complex and they offer a broad spectrum of tasks. So and that's one of the reasons why it's such an interesting thing to work on. Most important, in my view, is really to try to keep a holistic approach and never to forget the patient perspective. The hospital building is really a facility for care, and as such, the value is largely defined by how well it performs this task. So that's why I find that the role of the hospital architect is really defined more by the flows and the functions and the planning of the interior parts. It's quite difficult. It's sometimes you always have to be like a good consultant, if you know the expression. If you know what I mean, that you have to think about what is best for the project, and what is best, and especially what is best for the end user, the staff and the patients, and have a very holistic approach to the whole thing. Because what you have to keep in mind is that the running costs of a hospital staff primarily is roughly equivalent. I mean, the running costs for maybe 2 to 3 years is usually roughly equivalent to the whole construction cost of a new hospital. So what's really important from a more societal point of view is that you have this holistic view, and you look at not the building itself as just a building, but everything, and the processes and the flows and the logistics and everything within the hospital as well. The user, both as in the patient and especially the staff, I would say, are the most critical participants in this design process. It's extremely important that you have get the sort of the specification of the project correct as early as possible, and that's also the hardest part, because if you're working as a doctor or as a nurse and you participate in these kinds of building processes, for one thing, you have to take time out of a usually very busy schedule, so that might be a complication. And also, you have an agenda that you want to further your field. This is perfectly fine and normal. And but it also means that you, for example, you usually want to delay the decision on what kind of medical equipment you buy until the latest possible moment, because then you can ensure that you have the latest, the newest, and the best equipment. And this is very counterproductive for a building project, because we need the decisions and the parameters set clearly as early as possible to be able to integrate everything into the building and make sure it all works. So that is that's a challenge, and it also means that the participants in these early stages, it's really important that you have the medical staff, as well as of course architects and other consultants, electrical engineering, etc., all participating. And I'm a strong believer in this, that you have to work from the inside out when you're designing a hospital. And you can start quite early on in a project while you're debating what kind of functions you're going to have in the hospital. You can already start looking at the sort of Lego bricks that are the rooms and the smaller parts, and you can define those and start and sort of build the project from the inside or from the smallest component and expand on that and add to it as the process goes along. And in that part, you could actually, the design of the room is the most critical part. This is where you work. This is where the action happens. I think that finding ways to get the manufacturer support in these early stages is great. I know your facilities at your plant, don't remember what you call it. It's yeah, exactly, the Dräger Design Center. That's that's a great facility, and it would be excellent if that was available in every country, I would say. That would really help, because we in especially the larger hospital projects, it's often the case that we actually get to do mock-ups in one-to-one scale of all the important rooms, like usually the most common rooms and the most technically advanced ones. So an operating theater would be a prime example. And doing that, and you can install all the technical installations and the medical technical installations as well, and the staff can actually, practice there. Not you can't perform an actual operation, but you could do everything apart from that, and fake an operation and do all the movements and try everything out and make sure it actually works. And we try to do that as much as possible. As long as you get to a fairly large project size, there is usually scope within the budget to do these things as well, and that will guarantee a much better function, I would say. And it's a way to sort of drive the development as well of these kinds of spaces. It is pretty much, as I said, it's really faking it till you make it, if you know what I mean. It's building a space that has the exact dimensions and the facilities of the real room as it would be later on, and where you can test out the equipment and the placement of the equipment. And for example, in an operating theater, you would have the table and you would have the lamp and you would have 3 or 4 pendulums, and then there might be up to maybe 12 people in there as well, performing different functions, plus a bunch of other equipment, anesthesia and things like that. And how these people interact, and they're making sure that everything in it is in its right place, and that it functions, and they won't crash into each other, or the people crashing into people, or they crossing paths, or it's just it's like a micro logistics, or what you call it, to ensure. And then you find that something won't work, then you move it and you try again. I would say that the development we've seen over the last decade or so with 3D imaging and using BIM modeling really helps as well, because it makes this more feasible in a smaller project where you usually you don't have the time or the budget to build things in reality, but you can always, you build it in BIM, you build it anyway in the virtual world. So with the correct geometries, again, back to the manufacturers that they have to supply that. It's quite possible to use 3D glasses and things like that and get a very good sense of how things would work, and the feeling of being there and where things are. And that technology is getting better all the time. So that is the virtual world is really kind of the future. The future is already here.